Hello, everyone. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us on All Things Relative, Finding Family at the Library. My name is Sean Briscoe, and I'm a librarian at the Monterey Public Library. And I wanted to, first, before we dive in, just a couple ground rules before we get going is I ask that everyone mute themselves while Kathy is presenting, just to kind of help limit any distractions. And then also, if questions arise throughout the program, please feel free to place them in the chat screen and I will be monitoring that. And or we can hold off till the end where we can ask Kathy some questions. And that's about it. So we'll start today, but I'd like to introduce our host, Kathy Nielsen. Kathy Nielsen is a reference librarian and educator. She is currently a popular genealogy speaker on the Monterey Peninsula. She has been featured on Lisa Louise Cook's weekly YouTube program, Elevensies. She's the co-founder of the Monterey County Genealogy Society's special interest writing group, Off the Charts. Kathy incorporates her skills as a historian, storyteller, and librarian in her search for her family's history. So I would like to introduce Kathy, and it's all yours.
Thank you, Sean. It's so nice to see you all, and nice to see some family members and also people that I know from genealogy. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. And Sean, you can let me know if it all looks like it's going okay.
Right. Looks good.
Okay, great. Let me just get into my, okay, here we are. Well, families and stories and photos, they all go together. And we all know that expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Photos tell a story. Photos will tell us about people, the place where the photo was taken, who took it, how it was taken, how did we get it, how did it get in our hands, why it was taken, and maybe a little bit about the photographer who took it as well. A photo's not only about the individuals, but it's also about a group story, and it's about a story of our country and even our world. It tells us about what was going on at that time in that place. And so we can place a photo in a historical context. It tells us the story of the photographer who took it, because he's the one framing, he or she is the one framing the picture and telling the story. So today we're going to get into photos and share how they tell a story. And I hope that I can give you some tips on identifying some of those mystery photos, and also some tips on organizing and even editing some of our old photos. So this is a picture of my Swedish family. This was scanned by my dad. My dad did a lot of scanning, which I really appreciate, and he identified a lot of the pictures. But this particular picture, he wrote May, Mom, Hazel, Helen, and Jenny. And that's all he wrote on it. So I took a closer look at this picture to figure out who these people are. And I could see my grandmother. My grandmother's in the white cap in the back, and my grandfather's next to her in the bowler hat. So I knew those two people just because I know what they look like. And I knew a great aunt, Jenny, who's on the right there holding the baby. That is my grandmother's sister. And her husband is standing by the car, Johnny. And the three girls on the left are my aunts. And I know because of the ages, one is the oldest is Hazel, the next one's Helen, and then May. And that points this picture probably about 1918, because I looked at the girls' ages. I looked at the car. I have an uncle who is a car aficionado, Uncle Marvin, and I sent him this picture and I said, what is this car? Do you know? And he said, it's probably a Dodge and it's probably 1918. And notice how it has a focal place in this picture. The two girls in the front with the coats on are all ready to get in the car. And they are the children of my aunt and uncle, great aunt and uncle. They have their coats on and they're set. And this is probably that last minute picture that we all do when we haven't seen someone for a while and they're taking off. And let's say we get out the camera and we say, let's take that picture. I don't know who took this picture, but someone framed it and thought about it. That is their house in Ripon, which is by Modesto. And the car is a focal piece here. Johnny must be very proud of his car. This family lived in Fresno. My grandparents lived in Ripon, which was by Modesto. So they had they had just moved in 1918. My dad was not born yet, so he's not in this picture. So using these clues, I can put together a little bit about the story of this picture. There are some people I don't know, the fashionably dressed ladies. I don't know who they are, but I do know that it was an opportunity for a family reunion. Now, this is a picture that really isn't even a great picture, but this picture means a lot to me. And I hope that you will look at your pictures, your family pictures, and keep those that give you memories, remind you of things. This is my dad, and my family was part of that migration to the suburbs in the 1950s. And this was the kitchen of my home, of my family home in the 50s and the 60s. And, you know, my father was a World War II veteran. He was able to get, you know, a GI loan, and they built their ranch style house in the suburbs. Now, the thing about this picture that is so great is that I remember with my brother sitting at the counter, having breakfast, getting ready for school. I see there the dishwasher. My mom must have been so thrilled to have a dishwasher. There was the radio, the coffee pot. We haven't seen coffee pots for a while. The fruit basket. She's got her letters and her bills on the wall in that holder. You know, we don't have so many letters now. But that was where she put the letters she wanted to respond. And of course, the rotary dial phone. There's a piece of furniture in the corner. I don't know if you can see that very well, which is my grandmother's. That brings back that. And my dad must have been very proud to have this home for his family. So this picture just tells me is a story to write up, a memoir of my childhood. And by the phone, you see this address book. It was a metal, maybe some of you had one of these. It was a metal way to keep your addresses. You move the slot down the side and you would go to the letter and it would pop up and there would be the phone number. And then you would make your phone call on the rotary dial. So this is really an historical picture from the 1950s and 60s and well worth keeping, even if it's not the best picture of my dad. So after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the things that we all honor in this world. This was a quote by Philip Pullman, and he's the author of The Golden Compass. And that's a young adult book that was later made into a movie. But I think that's true, that stories are right up there with nourishment, shelter, and companionship. Okay, let me just go back here. Okay, I do want to give credit to Maureen Taylor, who I've learned so much from. Those of you that are genealogists may have followed her. She calls herself the photo detective, and she is someone who helps with photos, helps organize photos, helps identify photos. And she's written a couple of books that, for those of you who want to pursue this subject and look for clues in your photos, her famous book is Family Photo Detective. And she takes you through the different decades and helps you identify based on fashion and hair and other kinds of things. In fact, she's written 2 books in addition, Bonnets and Hats and Hairstyles. And she believes that you can actually identify a picture to the decade at least based on bonnets and hats and hairstyles and clothes. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Another book that I've used is Dating Old Photographs by Chronicle Press. And this is also very helpful. It takes you through the decades. And then another book that came out a couple of years ago is Out of Style, and it goes through the fashions of different decades. And as you can see here, the hoop skirt was in 1853 and it died in 1873. And then you can see how the skirt gets thinner and thinner. The skirt tells us so much about the time a photo was taken. So what to consider? We've got an old photo. It's a mystery photo. We don't know who these people are. We don't know when it was taken, and we don't know where it was taken. So what are some ways that we can start to get some clues and perhaps identify that photo? Well, one of the first ones and one of the easiest is the format. Is it a daguerreotype? Is it a Brownie snapshot? Kodak Eastman snapshot? Is it a tintype? So that will give us some clues. Who took the picture? Was it a photographer that is well known, or was it a family member? What about the captions? Captions are not always right, but they can give us clues. And the location or the background, like in that first picture I showed you, I did know that house was in Ripon. So that gave me a clue right off the bat that it was my grandparents' family home. And then there are clues with the clothing, the house, the car, the garden. There may even be a street sign. And facial features, of course, and software helps us with that. And then if you are doing family history, you can start to put family groups together based on their dates and where they're living. So that really helps you put things together. And then local and national history. So in the time that the setting when that photo was taken. And I'll give you some examples of that. Okay, let's look first at the formats of the photo. Now, if you have a daguerreotype in your family, that is really valuable, and take very good care of it. That is the first kind of photo that was taken, 1839, and they were popular until the 1860s. This one is of Louise McCord. She was a famous poet and author. And as a result, this daguerreotype is particularly valuable at $7,000 because she is well known. It's a copper plate with the shiny mirror-like surface. It's coated with silver and it's framed by a mat, and it's got to be held at an angle to be seen. Otherwise, it disappears and it becomes like a mirror. It's usually in a case, and that's to protect the backing of it. So this is a very special photo. At this time, if you moved, it would blur. So you may have seen where people have something around their to hold their head straight, and they would sit there maybe 3 to 15 minutes to be still while that initial photo was taken. Later on, they were able to, with improvements, take it down to 30 or 90 seconds. But any kind of movement would cause a blur. So that was they tried not to have that happen. Then the next photo that came around was an ambrotype, and that was in the 1850s. That also was in a case. You can see that this gentleman's photo. This, though, was a negative on glass, and it had a dark backing, which would flake off. So if you touch that backing, you lose the picture. So if by chance you have an ambrotype, which would be on glass, you don't want to take it out of the case because the chipping of the backing would take away from the picture. So that's an ambrotype, 1850s. The ambrotype cost about, but the daguerreotype was very expensive. It cost $2.50, which is about $75. So not many people could have a daguerreotype taken. The ambrotype type was 25 cents, and that was about $8. So it was a little bit more in the range of what people could afford. But what people could really afford was the tintype. And that came out in the 1850s. That would be what the Civil War soldier would have taken of his family or himself, so that there'd be a memory as he went off to war. They were usually about 2.5 by 3 inches. They weren't very big, and they were only 5 cents, which would be about $1.50 our time. but it was a negative on iron or steel plate. It was a positive image. It was magnetic. So if you have a tintype and a magnet sticks to it, you know you've got a tintype. It was called a tintype because they cut them with tin shears. It wasn't because it was made of tin. It was actually made of steel or iron. And it was on a black metal background with a muddy quality. It would darken over time. And it was usually put in a mat. Now, this is one of my grandfather. He was 3 at the time. And this is when he's a little bit older. These are both tintypes. This one is in a paper case. This one was not. You can see how muddy this early one got. It was obviously left out. And I've worked on it a little bit. I'll show you the results that I have so that you can see it a little bit better. But that's a precious, those 2 photos are very precious. One is 1877 and the other is 1879. So after the tintype came the cabinet card. And the cabinet card really helps us with our mysteries because it shows us who the photographer is and it shows us where the photographer took the picture. So then we can say, oh, it's that family group that lived, this is Hillsborough, North Dakota. Oh, it's the North Dakota group. And Scrimset was in the 1890s. So I know that that picture was around that time. They were called cabinet cards. They were made of cardboard and they were on a cardboard backing and they'd be put in a little holder on top of the cabinet. So as a result, they became a cabinet card. They were about 6.5 inches by 4.5 inches. And the photographer's name and location is on them. The great thing about these cards is you could buy a dozen for $2. So that would be maybe $40, a dozen for $40 today. So people could send them to their family and to friends. So this is the beginning of sending photos back and forth. And those were the cabinet cards. And then turn of the century, photos got really maybe even out of control a bit because the rage was to have a Brownie camera, an Eastman Kodak Brownie camera. And that came out in 1900. And that's many of the pictures that you may have that are snapshots or were taken by a Brownie camera. It cost $1. And now that would be about $30. So it was fairly reasonable. A family could afford it. And every year or so, Eastman Kodak would put out a new book, How to Make Good Pictures, a handbook for the everyday photographer. So that's when we really start to collect our photos. And this is one of those snapshots, an Eastman Kodak snapshot, probably about 1904. The Eastman Kodak motto was, you press the button, we do the rest. And this is a photo of my great-grandfather, Anders Petter Anderson. He didn't change in 30 years, so it's very hard to date photos by him. But his children and his daughter-in-law who's next to her, and my grandfather, I know their ages, and I know this picture is probably taken around 1904, something like that. And it was probably taken in Kingsburg, where my family moved after North Dakota. So every photo tells a story. It tells the story of who owned the photo, who took the picture, who's in the picture, what was the event, why was it taken, when was it taken, where was it taken, and why was it taken. And this is Anders Petter Anderson in North Dakota. He was an immigrant from Sweden. He came in the 1880 to North Dakota. He was able to acquire 160 acres because of the Homestead Act in 1862, which were given to immigrants free. And this picture was taken either in front of his house, on the steps of his house, or he may have had a shed or something. But I love this picture because it has his Swedish cap on. He has his wedding ring. He has his Levi Strauss jeans, which of course were made popular during the gold rush, and they're ripped and torn, and his shoes are old. He probably has his jackets hung up on a peg there to his left. He was 39 when he immigrated. And this picture is taken in the 1880s because they were only in North Dakota 10 years. And so he's only in his 40s in this picture, but already he's lived a very full life. So let's look at the clues again. Let's just go over them again. We've looked at the format of the photo, and that can actually help us with the decade. So if it's a tintype, we know it's not going to be until the 1860s. If it's a snapshot, we know that will be the turn of the century, 1900s. We know about the background. We know about the building, the house, the street sign, the garden, clothing, and the automobile. And let's look a little bit more at some of these. Okay, background. Maybe some of you will recognize this. This is Highway 101, north of Prunedale, Romus. And you probably can recognize that that's in the area of the rocks. You know, the famous rocks where the robbers would come down and rob the stagecoaches. So this is taken about the turn of the century from a hill. My family had a ranch in Prunedale. And this is my grandmother. She was probably about 20 at the time. And this road, to become Highway 101, divided their ranch, which had some ramifications later on when the large Highway 101 was built. But because I know that's the rock area, and I know that my family lived in Prunedale, that I'm able to kind of figure out when this was. And I know that my grandmother was born in 1878, something like that. So she would have been in her 20s in the late 1890s. I can kind of figure out a little bit about this picture. Now, the Monterey Public Library California room has thousands of pictures. Sean mentioned that earlier. And this is one of their gems from the California room. And it was taken by, you can see down there in the lower corner, C.W.J. Johnson. He had a studio, a parlor where he took pictures. This is the Del Monte Hotel. And this is the kitchen staff. And probably the man on the right was in charge of the kitchen, and maybe the man on the left was the manager of the hotel. But because we know that's the Hotel Del Monte, and the Hotel Del Monte did burn down several times, we can actually figure out that this is in the 1890s. And we do know when C.W.J. Johnson was taking pictures. So using those clues, we start to tell the story of this photo. This is again the Del Monte Hotel, and notice the dress of the women and the hats and the girls. We can see the hotel in the background. Now this picture is from Kingsburg, and this is the immigrant Swedish great-grandfather who came to America with nothing, with his 2 kids, soon to be 7 kids, and he built in Kingsburg a Queen Anne Victorian house. He was able to do that. And this is a picture of him with his daughter-in-law and my great-grandmother, Frederica. She had obviously a hard life. She's 59 in this picture. And you can see she probably has rheumatism or arthritis in her hands. And she was to die in the next year. But because I know the ages, and again, you can see Anders Petter hasn't changed in 30 years, so I can't use him. But Jenny is about in 1904. My great-grandmother's ready to pass us on within the year. I can kind of figure out that this house, and I do know from the census, and I do know from the deeds, that this house was built in around 1904, and they were living in it then. After my great-grandmother died, my great-grandfather built another house, an even larger house, and he married again. He married again.
Can I call you back? I'm on a class on Zoom. Yeah. Okay.
So, this is another Queen Anne. You can see the shingles. We'll get into houses in another time, which is another favorite topic of mine. But you can see he has a barn. He's got the outhouse on the left. He's got a buggy. He's in his Swedish clothes, his Swedish farm clothes. The gentleman on the left is my grandfather, who is a realtor. He sells ranches. And of course, he's got the bowler hat and the jacket and the tie. And so here are two generations, the immigrant and his son who was born in America. They all speak Swedish, but they're already moving in different directions here. I went back to look for this house in Kingsburg, and unfortunately there was a fire and it was destroyed. And at that time, which was a few years ago, this is the roof of the barn and the outhouse, and it hadn't been cleared away. I don't know if it has now, but this is why pictures are so important, because these structures don't last forever necessarily. Now, this is another picture, which is an advertisement of my grandfather, who was the realtor, and he had him postcards. He sent out saying, you know, California, come to California. You know, the streets are paved with gold, there's fruit, and etc. And this was his advertisement for his real estate company. Now, as we look at images and we look at, try to figure out where places are, I don't know, many of you may have used this, but this is a really good trick if you haven't. Scan your picture and then upload it into Google Images. You see the camera right here. Upload it, upload your image, and then look for what Google has to say about it. Now, this is Vaucluse House, which is a family house of my husband's in Australia. And we, if I were to put this picture in Google, this is what I get. Google immediately says, ah, that's the Vaucluse House. It's in part of the Sydney Living Museums. I've also put some of the railroad stations that my father's train during World War II went into. He was on a Red Cross train. He was a pharmacist on a train. And he would go into different stations in Paris as they were picking up wounded and picking up survivors from the camps. And I put those in, and I was able to identify the train stations. So give that a try. That's a really, if you have a mystery photo and you're not sure where it's taken, that might give you some clues. Also try that with heirlooms that you have, things that you don't know what they are, like a cooking instrument that you have no idea what it is, but it's been passed on down through the family. These are water jugs that are on the trains in New Zealand, and we have a couple of those. And I put that into the Google Images search, and there was quite a bit about how they were used. They were put on the trains so people could help themselves to water. So give that a try. That's kind of a fun way to explore more things in a photograph. Okay, let's look at clothing. Okay, this is my 3 times grandmother. So she's back in the 1850s. And because of her clothes, I know just about the decade that this is from. I do know because of her age, and I do know she died in 1861, but the clothes confirm when this picture was taken. It was very popular in the 1850s for an older woman to have a cap like that, and to have her hair parted in the middle, and to have her hair behind her ears. Also, you can tell her skirt is really full. So we're talking about the hoop skirt, you know, a large slip underneath. She's got the cuffs that are detachable and the collar that's detachable. Now, they weren't going to wash their dresses every day. And of course, you've all seen pictures of how the dresses dragged in the dirt and all that. They would just remove the cuffs and the collars and wash those and wear the dress over and over again. So that little pleating on her bodice area and the skirt show that this is probably 1850s. I don't know if this is a tintype because it's a digital picture. I don't have the original, but I imagine it might be. I don't know. Now this is her granddaughter, and this is 1868. Now let's look at the clothes on this a little bit different. You can see that the skirt is not, it's not a big hoop skirt. It's a little narrower. She's got a smaller collar. Her hair is again parted down the middle and behind her ears, the same kind of thing. Her shoulders are off. There's not a seam on the shoulders. And his style, my great grandfather's style, has got a loose skirt and a loose jacket and a skinny tie. This shows that this is an 1860s photo. And I do know they were married in 1868, and very likely she's pregnant in this picture. This may have been taken before they came to California, or it may have been taken in California for that matter. I don't know, because there's not a photographer's name on this, but this is in 1868. You can see how there's a difference from her grandmother. Now this would be their daughter-in-law, my grandmother, Catherine, and she's got, maybe you see these in the historical dramas that are on TV. She's got the detail on the shoulders, very fancy, because this is a graduation picture from secretarial school in Santa Cruz. And she, those peaked sleeves were really popular in the 1980s. And so, 1890s, sorry. And she, probably, this is a setup for the photographer. He moves each student in, takes a picture, moves the next one in, and whatever. But this would have been the turn of the century, 1900s. Oh, and also, what is a giveaway here is her hairstyle. We're getting into that Gibson look, you know, the puffed up. She doesn't have the down the middle. She does not have the part down the middle. She has it puffed up and in the back. So that's getting into the early 1900s. Again, we're looking at Del Monte, and the girls have a plaid style that was very popular with the children. Notice how these skirts are narrower, and the hats, later 1890s. Here's a 1904 picture with the hat. My grandmother went on to become a milliner, and this is her business suit that she would have worn in San Francisco. And of course she had to have a fancy hat because this was her business. So this would have been about that time, turn of the century, into the 1900s. Now about this time, business pictures started to be taken of businesses and people at work. It was not the formal picture. It was more a relaxed picture. Although this picture probably may have been for marketing reasons, because this is of a glove factory. And you can see the owner may be down there on the lower left because she has the big hat and she's dressed in a fancy fashion. The workers have skirts and shirt waists. The men have suspenders. And you can see they're holding up a glove, the gentleman in the middle there. My grandfather's in the top right. And so they're a little bit more informal. It's not the formal pose picture, but more at work. This is even more informal. This is cutting cots, apricots in the valley. Many youngsters who grew up in the valley would get jobs during the summer to cut the cots, cut the apricots. And this is a picture of them at the shed, and they're cutting cots. In fact, I wanted to share with you, let's see if I got it, a letter from one of my cousins in my uncle in Kingsburg. He wrote to his cousins in Sweden, and he said, 1905, he wrote this, "Here are all kinds of fruit are growing, grapes, plums, apricots, nectarines, peaches, pears, figs, oranges, lemons. If you decide to move over here soon, there is plenty of work for both old and young. When the harvesting of fruit begins, they hire people to cut the fruit to be dried. It is easy work to do, and they pay 5 cents per box. Some girls cut between 20 to 40 boxes a day." So that's my grandmother and grandfather in the back. On my grandmother's the second one over from the right, and they're cutting cots. If you have someone in a military uniform, definitely put it into Google Images because they may be able to identify the regiment, and that can be really helpful. The automobile. So this is a turn of the century automobile, you know, by knowing the date of the automobile, then we can identify the picture. And this is of my grandfather and my aunt Helen, who I know was only about 4 in this picture, and she was born in 1904. So this picture's got to be about 1908. And here's my great grandfather again, proudly with his wonderful car that he's so happy to have. And this was probably a Dodge, 1918. He died in 1920. So notice how the cars are really big deals in these pictures. People are so proud to have a car. And I think this is amazing because here's this immigrant tenant farmer who moved from farm to farm and then came to America. And now here he is with his Dodge. Sometimes pictures honor an event. And this was a gentleman who died early in life of consumption. And he went to, this card was sent to Sweden to let the family know that he had indeed passed away. And the Swedish family found this in an old Bible and sent it to me and said, do you know who this is? And I didn't know who this was, but I sent it out to cousins, and it is the first husband of Alma from North Dakota. Sometimes pictures were taken of funerals. And this is a picture of the family all standing around the casket. Sometimes a caption can be very misleading though. And this one dates this picture as 1906, but the people could not be this. This is an aunt and uncle of mine who wouldn't have been my uncle, wouldn't even have been born. So you have to be wary of captions. They can help you, but sometimes they can be misleading. This was taken in San Francisco. 1906, this of course is the time of the earthquake and the fire. Photographer gives you all kinds of information. And here, Scrimseth, notice the DT. DT stands for Dakota Territory. Dakota didn't become a state, North and South, until 1889. So I know that anything with this, any picture that has this on it has got to be before 1889. And here's some pictures from the Dakota Territory. Here's North Dakota. So this is after 1889. This is a town that was quite close to where my family settled. So who is the photographer in that picture? It's a Scrimseth. He's born in Norway. He was in Fargo in 1878. He was in Buxton, where my family was, in 1881. He was in Hillsborough in 1882. He produced 100,000 photos, so quite a collection. North Dakota did not become a state till 1889. So those people in that picture, they're about 30 years old. The children are about 2 or 4. And I can kind of figure out that this picture's around 1891 or 1892. So it's like you're using your detective skills to look for clues in the picture. The New York Public Library has an identities catalog of different photographers. So if you are looking for more information, of course you can Google the photographer's name, but if you're looking for more information, you might check out this database at the New York Public Library. And here's Scrimseth and all the places where he worked. And he was right there in the Dakota area where my family was there. Another thing, clue, are the historical context. And this is another one from the Monterey Public Library. In 1891, there were horse-drawn streetcars, and those are the tracks. You probably recognize where this is. It's the Custom House down by the wharf. So these horse-drawn streetcars were on those tracks. So we know it's got to be after 1891. The electrical streetcars did not come in until 1901. So it's got to be that decade, 1891 to 1901. And here they are, they're Californios family, and they're by the Custom House. So we can start to put together the story, at least the timing of that photo. And this was another well-known photographer, Cerulean, and he did take pictures 1890 to 1901, which is exactly where that picture was taken. So again, we wanted to look at the format, the background, the buildings, the garden, the clothing, the automobile, and the photographer, and any historical context. Facial recognition is really helpful too, because you can look at the shape of the face. Now, the problem is that a nephew may be identified as an uncle because of family resemblances. We all know how that works. But facial recognition, the eyes, the nose, the ears, the hair, and that's really helpful too. And particularly if you have a picture of that person. It's most helpful if you're using software if the person is in the same pose, like if their head is turned to the right, then it's easier for the software to pick it up and identify it as a certain person. And anyway, Mac, Photos, Photoshop Elements, Google Photos, and HyHeritage, which is a subscription site like Ancestry, all use photo recognition. And it'll be interesting to see where this goes, because there is a lot of questions about how this may be used down the road. But it certainly is very helpful to us as genealogists and family historians and people who are identifying our pictures. So photo recognition pulled all my photos for my grandmother. This was using photos on my Mac. So now let's look at organization. And I want to give a special shout out to my daughter, Sarah, who's on today, because she helped me deal with this. This is my COVID project, pandemic project. I was really good about historical photos, but the photos of the kids of the last 30 years were a different story. And I'd get those yellow envelopes and I'd look at the pictures and share them and delight in them. And then I put them in a box, didn't label them, just threw them in a box. And so I live in Carmel Valley, and last August, of course, we had to evacuate. Fortunately, all that worked out okay. And I knew that I wanted to take my photos. So I went around the house and I picked up all my photos and I put them in the car to save them. And I thought, I've really got to do something about this. This is one of my to-do lists. And so my daughter and I started to organize the photos by year. It's fun if you have somebody that can do it with you, because they remember these stories as well, and maybe remember more than you did. And we've had a lot of chuckles about that. So you go through one box at a time, which we did, and we decided whether to toss, digitize, or put in an album. We tried to keep one copy of each image. And you can ask yourself, how many pictures do you need of a vacation? Pick the best ones. You don't need all of them. Select the important ones, toss the others, and get rid of those blurry, over and underexposed pictures. And then scan the ones you want to keep. So we had we had lots of boxes, but here was 1987 to 1989. And we started to put them in order by year. And my daughter was much better at this than I was. She could remember a lot of these events. And then we put the duplicates and the blurry ones in a box. And then we put others in a box to give to people, to family and friends who might be interested. They were duplicates and we didn't need them. Don't store your photos in these plastic boxes, because the plastic emits a gas, and that's really not going to be good for your photos. But certainly for sorting and getting organized, that's fine. But long-term storage, you want to get archival boxes. So I'm in much better shape in this picture. We've actually organized it by the way, these brown boxes are archival boxes. So those are good to get a hold of. Gaylord is a library company that has archival storage boxes. So I'm in better shape. I've started to get it into years. And now I'm looking at scanning. And I have one of those 3-in-1 scanners that many of you have, that copy it, it prints, it copies, and it scans. And it's fine. But I wanted a little bit more quality. So I purchased a new scanner. I purchased an Epson V600, a flatbed scanner. And I'm really pleased with that. And I started scanning. Things that are three-dimensional, like a daguerreotype or something that is not going to lay flat on a flatbed scanner, or something like an heirloom that you might have. There's a thing called the shot box, where you put your iPhone in the top of it and it controls the light and it takes great pictures of three-dimensional things. So if that's something that you do need to do, look up shot box. It's a great little invention. There's also PhotoMine is an app which will scan, and it is free. You pay more if you want more sophisticated options on it, but it will work. And this works particularly good if you're at someone's house and they don't want to let you walk out the door with a photo, but you'd love to have a copy of it. You can scan it right there with your iPhone. The problem is it's only 72 DPI, which is great. That would be dots per inch. That's the resolution of the photo. The one on the left I did with this little app on my phone. The one on the right I did with my flatbed. They look pretty good, both looks good. But if I were to take this off the screen and enlarge it, I'd have better luck with the 600 DPI, which is on the right, than the 72 DPI, which is on the left. If I'm using a picture in a book, or I'm enlarging it and putting it in a frame, putting in a frame on the wall, I would definitely want a higher resolution. But if you're at someone's house and they've got the perfect picture, use this wonderful little scanner on the phone. These are two things I scanned on that, and they're perfect. They're good. They'll be fine. I've used scanning services. I used the Multimedia Center for videos, VHS, and 8mm films, and they did a good job. I try to go where the deals are, because this is an expensive process. Photos, movies, and more I use for slides, and Legacy Box I've used for snapshots. So those are three that I've used. So you might want to explore and wait till there's a special on, because it does add up. And when I've digitized my photos, I try and label them. I organize them in folders, and I tag them by name, event, date, and location. So here's folders. This is my dad did a lot of scanning, and these are folders from the scanning that he did that I have on my computer. And then the pictures that I'm adding to my collection, I'm putting a name on them. I'm putting the event. It's a who, what, when, where, why kind of thing. I'm putting the date. Not that when you put them into a software program, they date it the day you put it in, not the date the picture was taken. So you want to identify when you think that picture was taken, the location, and if there's any other metadata or other information that I want to tag my photo with, the source. For example, if I've taken something off the internet, maybe from the New York Public Library, in the public domain, from the New York Public Library site or the Library of Congress, I want to identify where I got that picture in case I do use it in a book or in something. I want to give credit for where I got it. And I would do that if it were in the public domain. Otherwise, I need to get special permission. If it's someone who gave me a picture, I want to identify that it's courtesy of someone, that I got that picture from a certain person. And I want to identify as best I can when that photo was taken. So if I've labeled and tagged everything, and this is photos in Mac, I can just put in Anders Petter, and all of my photos that have to do with Anders Petter come right up, and I have a slideshow right there. My grandfather, all his photos come up. My grandmother, all her photos come up. I've identified them as Escalon, the town where many of my family members grew up. My father grew up. Put in Escalon, all the Escalon photos come up. So tagging is really great and really important. A cousin named Robin, my husband's cousin, gave us a lot of photos. I wanted to be able to identify that they were from her. So if I put in courtesy of Robin, all the photos she gave me came up. So photo organization, there's a lot of software that you can use, and these are just some ones to think about. There's the HyHeritage collector system. That's comes in a CD, pretty antiquated in these days, but it is a CD, you pay for it, photos are on your computer, you don't have a subscription. Memory Web is a subscription. It's just like we're moving towards all these things. Collectionaire is a subscription. Google Photos, it's free to a certain point, and then when you have too many, you're using too much memory, then you need to start paying for it. And Apple Photos. So those are just some. You may find others. This is the HyHeritage collector. These are made for genealogists. You put in the family, and then you attach the photos with each family. And this is the HyHeritage collector system. Now, Memory Web is online. The thing about Memory Web is it takes from Instagram, it takes from Facebook, it takes from anywhere you may have photos and brings them together and puts them with a family unit. But there is a monthly charge and a yearly charge. I tried it, it's great. Dropbox, Facebook, Family Search, all of them all go into this wonderful organizer. I told you about Maureen Taylor. She raves about this. She uses this with her clients. She has consultations with people who are trying to figure out who their photos are of. And she uses this as a way of working with her clients, and she raves about it. But it is good. You upload your photos, you tag them, you have your metadata, your names of your people, and you pull them up and you can have a slideshow. So it is a great way to organize and share your photos with your family. You also can give the links to your family. Your family can go in and download photos if they want. These are my seven aunts. My dad had 7 sisters and he was the only son. And so I was able to identify all of the sisters and my grandmother and put them in albums. So it's very, very, really easy to use. And then it also does by location. So how many photos you have in Escalon, how many you have at Tahoe, how many you have wherever. Now, Collectionaire, this is one that is also a subscription, but this one appeals to me because you can actually put audio tapes in and you can put movies in. So with each person, you've got not only their photos, you've got everything else about them. And so you can share this with the family. Also, these photos originally stay on your computer, and this software brings them together, aggregates them on the web, but you still have the actual photos and audio tapes and movies. So this one is something to look at too. These are just ideas that you might want to explore if this is something you're looking for. This just came out this last year, and they are really doing a big promotion, and people are raving about it. Collectionaire, it's called. Google Photos, scanning them, great way to share with your family. I just had a high school reunion and people posted high school pictures. So that was really fun. Google Photos is a good way to do that. And everyone has access. And if you're not using too much of it, it is not. Again, kids' pictures, passing them on. I do recommend that you have your photos in the cloud somewhere, that you have a web-based backup somewhere, because if you lose your laptop, your computer, your whatever, you've lost your photos as well. So I use Backblaze thanks to my son who recommended it, and it works just great. And when we had a robbery, and my husband's wonderful photos were all backed up on Backblaze, so did not lose anything. So web-based backup, I really recommend that, or cloud backup in some ways. Photo editing. Okay, so we've got a few more minutes. I want to just quickly, these are all great photo editors. Of course, the Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Lightroom, and those of you that use those wonderful programs, that's the best. But there are some that are a little easier for those of us that haven't done the learning curve. Snapseed is an app on your iPhone. Photos Mac has editing. And I use Restore VividPix, and I use HyHeritage. And I just want to share those two with you as other options to think about for those of us who are not so technical. Restore came out, maybe 4 years ago. Restore VividPix. It's a software, you download it. It's $50. It's not a subscription, you own it, you buy it. And what it does, all of the genealogy groups are raving about it. There's Maureen Taylor and Genealogy Guys, Genealogy Gems, Extreme Genes. These are podcasts of different genealogy speakers who speak all over the country. You take your picture, you digitize it, and you put it right into select an image to start. You put it in, and they give you 9 possibilities. And you look at those possibilities and you do a few little changes, contrast or whatever. And you can see that I picked one that had a bit more detail. This was the original. I just had a digital, and it had reflection, and it wasn't great, but I had it and I'm grateful for it. I took that photo and I wanted to keep kind of a sepia look, but notice how I can now see the detail in her clothes, in her hand, in her hair, I just by doing contrast, and it was very easy. Here I took the tintype of my grandfather, and I lightened up that muddy look. I lost some of the detail in the paper cover, but I lightened it up. I could see him a little bit better. And this really, the apricot cutting shed was so much better when I lightened that up. I lightened this one up. I could see their faces much better. This one also. And this one I'm so proud of because this is a pretty hard to see picture. But by working on it, I could see the three people in the window and I could see my grandfather. You can see I put a red circle around him. So it was easy to do. I was able to take some of these pictures and work on them. I worked on this one a little bit. So I also was able to work on documents. This is a diary of a great-grandfather who was a circuit minister in Presbyterian minister in Michigan. And I was able to take the faded pages and brighten them up a bit so I could read it better. So documents in handwriting works really well. HyHeritage is a subscription site like Ancestry, and they're really getting into enhancing photos. I took this picture and I colorized it. Now, whenever you change a picture, keep your original. Don't get rid of your original. But you can play around with it and see what you can do. And I colorized it. And when I colorized it, I could really see some of the people at this funeral. I could see my grandfather. I could see my grandmother. I could see my great-grandfather. I could start the colorizing helped me identify. Now, one of the things HyHeritage does is you can animate family photos, and that's a little weird, but you actually put your photo in and then it's animated, and that's interesting. I took this one. They have a repair feature. This is a picture of my husband in fourth grade, and you can see it's ripped and it's cracked, and I put it through HyHeritage. All I did was just do a repair, and this is what they came up with, a much better picture. HyHeritage is subscription, but you can play with it for free. The problem is they do a watermark down at the bottom, so it's not in its pristine form. But in any case, it's fun to do, and HyHeritage is really working on helping us with photos. So if you do have a HyHeritage subscription, be sure and try all this out. And we'll be talking more about HyHeritage. It's a wonderful site for those who have European ancestors. Okay, so what do you do with your photos? You do a photo book, a scrapbook, flash drive, video or slideshow. You want to create a book, you want to create an album. This one is a postcards. Come back to this picture if I can. This was my great-grandmother's album, and she saved all her postcards from her various kids. And here's Colton Hall, Pacific Grove. And if you have an album, don't take it apart, because the story is part of how the person put the album together. So you might want to put your photos in some kind of album that would tell your story, as she did with her postcards and her children's postcards. My father-in-law put together an amazing scrapbook of photos and the story of World War I. His father was fought in World War I. You might want to just pass on your photos with a flash drive. That's easy for those people who aren't technological, don't really are confused about Dropbox or other ways of passing on files. But pass them on to your family, get them out there. And you might want to make a movie. And this is one that my son did. And I just want to share this in conclusion of his grandpa on his 90th birthday. He took family photos and he put this together. So take those photos, do something fun with them, pass them on to your other family members, and share the stories of your family. This is the greatest gift really that you can give your family are the stories of their ancestors. And I hope that I'll see you next month. I'm going to be talking about DNA and how DNA has really changed genealogy. And if any of you have actually had your DNA tested, we're going to talk a little bit about what that means and what that can show you. In September, I'm going to talk about our homes and stories. October, we're going to talk about the heirlooms and what we're going to do with this stuff, because we've got to make arrangements for all this stuff that we have. And November, we're going to talk about sharing our family stories. When we talk about DNA, we're going to talk about the test options, the companies, the results, how you connect with your cousins with your DNA, and what's happening with DNA with the forensic investigations that are going on using DNA to find people who have been involved in crimes. So we're going to talk about all of this on August 12th, our next meeting. And in the meantime, I hope that you will be contacting Sean, who is our reference and local history librarian in the California History Room. And if you have any questions for me, please feel free to contact me too, because I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. Okay, so Sean, I'm going to turn it back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Kathy. That was a wealth of knowledge. We did have one question in the chat, and what should you use to label a photo on the back? Ballpoint pen, pencil? Is there any special writing implements, ink?
That's a really good question. You would want to use a soft leaded pencil. You would not want to use a ballpoint pen. So yes, I would, and don't put sticky labels on or anything like that. But a soft pencil would be the way to go.
Perfect. Thank you. Number 2 pencil, would you say?
Yes. I see creative memories. Is that Cynthia?
Yes. And at this time, if anyone does have a question, please feel free to unmute yourself and feel free to ask any question that comes to mind, or you can type it in the chat. We have plenty of time to answer any questions that are anything Kathy went over. So please help yourself. So one thing that I've always been curious, since I know my mother inherited my grandma's thousands and thousands of photos, is you talked about starting breaking it up by year. How do you know where to even begin, which year?
Well, I think that what you use is what you know about your family, so that if you know the ages of people, or you know the family unit, and you can see someone who's about 10 years of age and you associate them with a family unit, then you can say, okay, they were born in 1950. Then this has got to be around late 1950s, early 1960s. So it's really a guess. And I would actually start with just decades, start with your decades first. And then as you organize by decades, go in by years. But really what's helpful if you do know a little bit about your family and you know the location where they lived. So the family unit and where they lived and their ages are really helpful.
Thank you.
But if you don't know those, that's hard. You just have to sort of put it all together. Okay.
And one other question, out of just with your opinion, with everything nowadays being pictures on our cell phones, if one was to print a picture, would you recommend a size to help with storage?
Now, say that again. You would. So
since we all have a lot of our photos, like I don't have photos in my house, they're all on my computer and cell phone, but yes. I wanted to print some out because I wanted to have hard copies saved.
Yes.
Does size of the photo matter? Would that help with storage, in your opinion?
I don't, you certainly, I don't think it would be a problem at all. You have to decide whether, you want to do that or not, and whether what your purpose is. I think the thing is you decide what your purpose is. Are you going to do a book are you passing this on to someone? Are you putting it in a frame? And you want to use good paper, the best paper when you print it out, if you do want to save it. But you have to decide what your purpose is.
Oh,
And
thank
right
you.
now it's so easy to keep things digitally, and just print out when you have a particular need, like that photo that you want to put in a frame
Thank
on your
you.
mirror.
We have a couple questions in the chat. Instead of scanning or before you're ready to scan, what about sorting photos into archival boxes and envelopes?
Yes, you would want to do that because you don't know how soon you're going to be able to do it. So the archival boxes would be a way of getting them in order. And you have to decide whether you want to keep the negative. I mean, there's just so many decisions you have to make. But yes, archival boxes, if you can get a hold of them, I recommend Gaylord looking at their website. Also, some of the hobby stores like Michael's and whatever may have archival boxes too. But definitely store them, and store them in when you do have finished with this project. Make sure that your photos are in a safe place, not in the garage or in a cellar or in an attic where they're going to change because of climate changes. A really good place is actually under your bed where it's dark, or in a closet. So be sure you put your precious photos in a safe place.
Thank you. And a follow-up question is, Mylar photo sleeves, are those a good idea?
Well, you want to definitely get the kind that are archival, and you can get those at Costco, or you can get those at Staples, but just make sure that they are archival sleeves, and they're fine. This will be good. The library uses them. But yes, and that's a nice way to keep your photos very safe. And particularly fragile things too, fragile photos that you just don't want to just put in a box or an envelope.
Thank you. And if anyone has questions on where to find archival material, archival boxes, please feel free to reach out. We use them in the California History Room all the time. So we have a lot of different resources also. Another question came in. If you have a military photo of someone, is there a place to go that identifies military medals and units? This is for the Canadian military.
Well, I would start with Google and take a picture of the medals and see if there's something that will come up in on the web. But if you do know anything about where this person is from, you might contact the local library, the local historical society, and they might have more information on this regiment. Or so I would definitely start with Google. I mean, there's so much you can find that way. There's also, as you get more into it, you'll want to just contact. Well, there's a lot you can do with this, but start with Google. That's my answer to that.
And the last question that came in, any special tips about photographic slides? I have many from my parents from the 1960s.
Yes, there are, scanners who scan slides, and they do a very good job. I did initially purchase this inexpensive scanner and began the process of scanning slides, but they didn't turn out as well as I liked. So I did send slides off because I wanted a little bit more attention given to them. And the company that I used, which was Photos and More, did a very good job. So if you are scanning, look at all of your options. I know my husband, who is a photographer, has been exploring the options on his slides, and it is really it's more sophisticated than snapshots. So do it carefully and do it carefully and really explore your options on that. For me, it was easier to send them off, and I was happier with the results.
Thank you. And it's got time for one more question. I have some historic photos that are not of my family, like from Fresno in 1910. What do you do with these photos? Okay,
so you might contact the Fresno Library if they are of Fresno, just as people contact the Monterey Public Library with Monterey photos. the library might be delighted to have those. And if you have some background information on those photos, that makes it even more valuable. So I would reach out to the Fresno Public Library and the Historical Society that is in Fresno too, where your family lived.
All right, well, that wraps it up. We're running out of time, but I just want to say thank you all so much for joining us. A special thank you for Kathy for sharing all this information with us. We all have now things to do when we go home to look at our photos. And like Kathy said, we'll be doing this again next month, and we'll be talking about DNA. And so thank you again, and I hope everyone just has a great day and great week.
Nice to see you all, and I hope to see you next month. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Kathy.